Hey everybody, this is Tesla for Drop Top Tees. Yesterday on the fan club forum, somebody asked about manual mode on automatic transmission and paddles. I think they specifically asked about paddles and how they work. So since Saxy here is an automatic with manual mode and paddles, I thought we'd do a video. I know this is my videographer today, my beautiful wife Jennifer. It's also her birthday. Happy birthday, baby. I know that about a month after we bought this car, Jennifer still was like, I know we have it, but I don't really know how it works, so I don't use it. So I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that have automatics with these capabilities and you've never really figured out how they work, or maybe you're scared to because you don't know how it works, you don't want to mess it up. So we're going to show you today how your manual mode works, how the shift paddles work, and we'll also look at the sport button real quick. So hop in and let's go. But automatic transmission, they come with manual mode. They do not all come with shifters. So you may have this first part but not have the shifters. Let me talk the paddles. What I'm talking about right here, you can see the paddle with the minus on it. That's to downshift. Here's with the plus and the off, that upshifts, and it will also turn off temporary manual mode if you're in drive and use the paddle shifters, and we'll talk about that in a second. So all the automatics are supposed to have manual mode. Not all your cars have paddle shifters. So let's look at manual mode first. In order to put the car in manual mode, we're going to move it down the drive. I don't know if it'll show up. You can see how the orange button illuminates here to show you that you're in drive. This is automatic. If I want to take over and shift the car for myself, I just move the gear lever, gear selector to the left. Now I'm in manual mode. The orange button comes on, and on the dash it will say M1. Now I'm going to turn it back to drive, automatic shifting. It just says D. It doesn't tell me what gear I'm in. I wish it would say D1 through D6, but it doesn't. But D means the car is doing it by itself. Manual mode means I'm doing it mostly by myself, because the car will still exert its will upon me at certain moments, and we'll talk about that when we start driving. Actually, we can say a little bit right now and then we'll show you. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. If I want to shift to second gear, I pull the gear lever down toward the plus. That upshifts. If I want to downshift, I push it up, negative, and that downshifts for me. Now, there's certain times when the car will take over for you or not let you do what you want to do. Okay, so when you're in manual mode, there are several times the car is going to exert its will upon you and either take actions for you or ignore your input. The most common that you're probably going to experience is when you're decelerating. If you don't downshift at the appropriate times, the car will downshift for you, all the way down to first gear if it needs to. If you are upshifting and you try to upshift while the RPMs are still too low, it will ignore your order. It won't do it. If you're downshifting and your downshift would result in over revving the engine, it will ignore your input. So both upshifting and downshifting, there's times where the car may decide not to do what you asked it to, either because you're going to make the RPMs too low when you're upshifting, or the RPMs too high when you're downshifting. That said, it will not protect you from forgetting to shift. If you're accelerating and you're in manual mode and you rev it all the way up into the red zone, it will not upshift for you. The owner's manual warns you, cautions you not to over rev your engine when you're in manual mode. You have to provide the upshifts in order to keep your RPMs at the appropriate level. Now, that said, the rev limiter is probably going to kick in and cut your engine out for a while if you start to over rev. However, don't rely on that to happen. If you're in manual mode, pay attention, especially when you're under hard acceleration, and especially in like first gear. Because if you've ever accelerated your car hard from first gear, you know you use up first gear really fast. I'm talking about just a matter of 1 or 2 seconds. You need to shift to second or you're going to hit the rev limiter. So when you're under hard acceleration, remember you need to upshift yourself. The car is not going to save you. Okay, so while we're waiting for traffic to give me a chance to get out, right now I'm in manual mode and I'm in first gear. I can upshift to second. It will let me start out in second gear if I desire to. Why would I want to do this? Well, the most common reason you would want to start in second is, say it's winter and you have ice or snow on the road, slippery conditions. So in order to not spin your wheels as easily, you can start off in second gear. It just provides a much slower paced acceleration, a little bit easier to get off the line and get going when there's very slippery conditions under the tires. For now, we want to be in first gear. Now remember, I have to shift myself. And I shift myself up to second. Shift up to third. Shift up to fourth. I'll probably go up to fifth here. All the way up to sixth. We have a red light coming up around the turn here. So I'm holding the camera with my right hand. My left hand is steering. I am going to decelerate as we approach the red light, and you can see it already dropped down to fifth. As we come up, there it goes down to fourth. It is downshifting for me as it deems it appropriate based on engine speed and RPMs and my driving speed. So even though I'm in manual mode, it made some decisions for me. Now I'm accelerating again, I'm going to have to remember to upshift on my own. Okay, there's a real simple look at how manual mode works. So now, let me also show you this. I'm in manual mode. Here's my hand. I can just take my fingers. I just upshifted with my paddle. Other hand, press the downshift, and I downshifted with my paddle. Okay? You can use the paddles in manual mode or in drive mode. Now, I'm going to put it back to drive mode. You can see me go back to drive mode. Watch this. I'm going to get going a little bit faster, and I'm going to upshift. Well, now I'm not, because it just upshifted for me. So let me downshift. Notice how it switched to M4. It goes into manual mode temporarily. It won't stay there. I'm not going to touch any controls. Base there, I'm back to drive. Now, I can't say it'll switch back in 10 seconds, it'll switch back in 5 seconds, it'll switch back in 15 seconds, because there's no absolute time that it takes to switch back. It's based on your driving input, mostly on the throttle. Based on your use of the accelerator when it's in that temporary manual mode, it will decide when it shifts back to drive mode. No set time, but it is temporary. If you want to continue using your paddles, shift your gear selector into manual mode. Otherwise, it just keeps shifting back, and the thing is, when it shifts back, it's probably going to change gears. A lot of times it decides it knows what gear it wants. And you have to remember, when you're not in sport mode, its goal is to basically give you the best miles per gallon. So if you're driving using the paddles and you don't change your accelerator input it's going to shift back, and it may switch gears into a gear that you don't really want. So if you want to continue to stay in manual mode with your paddles, shift the car over to manual mode, and that way it'll stay there for you. So while we're driving out to the interstate, let me show you this. Let's talk about sport mode real quick. The Abarths come with sport mode. I know from comments on the internet, some of you use it all the time. Some of you hardly ever use it. Some of you save it just for when you're doing spirited driving. And some of you have no idea what it does. So, oh, nice UPS. Put on your left turn signal, turn right. So the sport button is that little switch right below your gear shift. Go ahead and press it, honey, up. Press it up for about 2 seconds. Good. Nope, do it again. And now it says sport mode underneath the D. It also, if you noticed, changed the RPMs of the car. And it a lot of times may even drop a gear when you do it, or when you come out of it, it may shift up a gear. The reason for this is sport mode uses a different map for the ECU and the transmission. It has different shift points. It changes the shift points to where you get more spirited driving. You get a little bit better torque, lower in the RPM band. And it also makes steering a little bit heavier. The reason being is that by making steering less tight, you get actual more precision in turning. They recommend it for when you're doing heavy, like hard turns and mountain twisty roads. Sport mode gives you better steering. I won't say it's better steering response. You get a better driver feel. You actually have to turn the wheel a little harder, but it lets you be more precise with your steering input. So the big thing that sport mode does is give you a little bit better torque at lower RPMs, gives you better feel from your steering wheel, and it changes the shift points. Because of that, it doesn't get as good a gas mileage. It's designed for sporty driving, not fuel economy. If you're just daily driving to work or somewhere, it may be a little bit more fun to be in sport mode, but like we're in traffic right now. I can't really hot rod the car. It doesn't help me to have it in sport mode. It actually hurts me because I'm losing mileage. So let's take it out of sports mode. Here's how to do it. All I do is take this pedal, hold down. Now I'm back in D, and if you notice, it shifted for me. It shifted for me when I came out of sport mode, because now it's back into more fuel economy oriented shifting. So we're almost to the interstate, and then I'll show you more of how the paddles work. So the first thing we're going to do is get up to speed. I'm now in 6th gear, and I want to accelerate. If I just accelerate lightly, I drop 1 gear. I barely press the pedal down and then drop the gear. Now say I really want to accelerate fast. I drop 2 gears. It dropped all the way down to 4th gear for me. That's the adaptive automatic shifting for you. Okay? I'm going to start, I'll put it in manual mode. We'll do the same thing. Okay? I want to increase my speed. I hit the pedal once, I only get 1 shift point. Because I'm in manual mode, it's not going to drop 2 gears for me. If I want to get harder acceleration, I have to hit the pedal twice. So here we're going to go back to 6th, and I'll show you how fast it'll shift Okay, I'm going to accelerate. Now here's the thing, I know I'm going to accelerate. I'm going to shift right away. I hit it twice, you saw how fast it shifted for me. But if you're used to in just regular automatic mode, punching it and having it drop 2 gears, be aware that when you're in manual mode, you need to do that yourself. You have to hit the up or the down paddle twice. It will not take over and do it for you. Okay, so I want to clarify one thing I said and add one thing I left out. Number 1, I said that when you're in manual mode or when you're using your shifter paddles and you drop a gear, you're trying to accelerate hard, it won't drop 2 gears for you. That's not exactly true. If you're at highway speeds, you're going 70, 80, and you punch it, most likely when you hit the downshift, it's only going to drop 1 gear. However, there are some times, especially if you hit the paddle again the second time, where it will go ahead and drop 2 gears and all of a sudden you're down in 3rd gear. Okay, so depending on what speed you're going at, depending on where your RPMs are at the time, you either downshift with the stick shift or with your paddle shifters. When you're doing it manually, sometimes it will go ahead, the adaptive automatic shift will kick in and you may drop 2 gears. If you're just cruising at 70 and you're in 6th gear and you try to punch it, go ahead and hit either the gear shift twice or the paddle shifter twice if you want to ensure that you're going to end up getting rapid acceleration, because most likely at those speeds you're not going to have it drop down twice. Okay, I just want to clear that up. Secondly, I left out one thing about the sport mode, and that is every time you turn off your car, it defaults back to regular mode. So that means even if you've been driving in sport mode for 8 hours today, you get home wherever you're going, turn off the car. When you get back in the car and turn it back on, you're going to have to manually shift it back into sport mode by pressing that little switch and holding it down. Okay? It will automatically, every time you turn off the car, default back to just normal driving mode. That's not a fault, it's just the way the car is. I know there's been a lot of people talking about they wish there was a hack to automatically make it start up in sport mode so they don't have to remember to click it over all the time. As far as I know, that doesn't exist. Okay, so there's a couple other things I need to show you or talk about. Number 1, in the owner's manual they caution you if you are either using paddles or in manual mode, if you're driving on ice, snow, or otherwise slippery surfaces, they advise you to be cautious in your use of downshifting and using your engine brake to slow down, because of the fact that when you downshift, the engine braking may cause your rear wheels to lose traction. So if you're slowing down and you downshift at the appropriate time, that's cool. If it's not really time to downshift yet and you downshift to help slow down the car and you're on ice, snow, wet leaves, something slippery, just be aware that it may cause your rear end to lose traction. The other thing is, on this paddle, I said that it upshifts and it also says off. What does that do? Well, if you're using your paddle shifters, and I'm going to show you, I am in drive and I'm going to use my paddle shifters. What it does, now show me. Remember I said that when you use your shifters, like I'm going upshift with my shifters. It put me in manual mode, and I'm going to stay in manual mode for an undetermined amount of time based on my driving patterns from this point forward. Well, say I'm getting ready to go through a 90-degree turn and I want to downshift to get in the gear so I can accelerate out of the turn. But now I'm in manual mode for a while. I don't want to stay in manual mode. I want to just downshift once, and then while I'm accelerating, go back to drive. How do I do that? Well, here's what you do. You just hold the plus paddle, the off paddle down. It'll beep a couple times. Instead of just pressing it to shift, you press it and hold it for just a short time. It'll beep and switch back to drive mode. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to downshift. Now I went into third gear. Now watch, I'm just going to hold it down, and it put me back into drive mode. It didn't wait the normal amount of time. So once again, I can, in manual mode, if I want to go back to drive mode and not wait for it to do it, I just press the button, hold it down, it shifts back for me. Again, be aware that when it shifts back, it's going to switch to the gear that it thinks is appropriate, and that may not be the gear you want to be in. So just be aware of that. Okay, so hopefully that explains the manual mode, the shift paddles, a little bit about sport mode for everybody. If you have any questions, ask me and I'll try to figure them out if I don't know. I will say this though, having owned Saxy now for a couple months and having been able to drive her around town and on some minor twisty roads, not hardcore yet, there are a lot of people in the club who, for good reasons, and I'm one of these former members, would say that if you have a car like this, you have to have a manual. It's the only way to have a roadster is to have a manual and experience the full joy of driving. You must have a manual. Well, folks, that's not true, okay? I would have argued the same as you 2 months ago. Having had Saxy with the automatic and manual mode and the shift paddles, I can unequivocally say that is no longer a valid position to maintain, okay? There are a lot of people who have to have an automatic either because of a disability or some kind of other problem where they have to have them automatic. They just can't use the clutch the way they want to. There are other people who may not even know how to drive a manual. They never learned. They grew up in automatics. Or there's some people who maybe do a lot of city driving. Like we do a lot of city driving here. I can't tell you how often we end up in traffic jams on Interstate 635 in rush hour or even non-rush hour because there's a wreck up ahead or something, and you go through a couple miles where it's very stop and go traffic, and automatic is much preferable to having a manual in that type of situation because you're never stuck in between gears. You're not constantly trying to go from first to second to first to second, and you never feel quite right on anything. The automatic does it for you. It's a lot easier to drive when you're in heavy city traffic. However, when you get open spaces and you can shift your automatic into manual mode or just use your paddle shifters, you are not missing that much over a manual. With manual mode, where you're using the gear shift to up and down shift, you get a lot of the same experience. You just don't have to press in the clutch. You're still telling the car when to shift, and you're picking what gear to go in. It's very much, you're even using your hand just like it was a manual. All you're missing is the clutch. If you're using the paddles, there's a lot of times when you're not on, like if you turn the wheel all the way over, all of a sudden your paddles are reversed. But if you can keep just going like this, your paddles are right there. You're on a twisty road, you can keep your hand, both hands on the wheel while you're selecting the gear you want to be in. It's actually safer than having to reach down here and taking one hand off the wheel. Most of the time you're on really hardcore roads where you have to turn hard, you're probably not going to be shifting at that point in time anyway. If you're smart, you're already in the gear you need to be in to get through the turn. And as you come out of the turn, you can upshift or downshift or upshift, whatever you want to do. However, the overall point is guys with manuals, girls with manuals, don't be so hardcore on the people with automatics. They all have manual mode. Some of them have the paddles, and I'll tell you what, they aren't missing as much of the experience as you think they are. And in some cases, it's actually preferable to have the automatic over the manual. That said, I will not be trading in my manual for an automatic anytime soon because I just like using the clutch. However, people with automatics have an awesomely fun car to drive, just like the people with the manuals. So think about that before you start ragging on somebody for having an automatic in a 124. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, little yellow button down there if you want to see more. And as always, if you want to support me, shop.spreadshirt.com/drop-top tees. Buy a t-shirt. You bought the car, now buy a t-shirt. Have a good day, guys. Okay, stop showing off your car, Jennifer. Video's over.
No!